I live kind of in hell. I mean, I'll be honest, my daily life is kind of and I'm alone. And sorry, I keep cussing. It's very hard.
Right.
I'm a cusser these days.
Okay.
Big time
You're
cusser.
allowed.
You are so much more. Christina Applegate's voice cracks as she speaks these words to her daughter, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling with the weight of everything she's trying to say and everything she can't. This isn't a scripted moment from one of her acclaimed television roles. This is raw, unfiltered maternal desperation. A mother trying to give her child the one thing Hollywood never gave her: permission to be more than what people expect, more than what the camera demands, more than the sum of her public image. This statement becomes the emotional heartbeat of a story that goes far deeper than tabloid headlines or social media controversies. Christina Applegate, once Hollywood's golden girl, the blonde bombshell who made America laugh through the cynical 1980s and reinvented herself as a respected dramatic actress, now faces something no amount of talent or determination can overcome. Her career hasn't just slowed, it's collapsed under the weight of a degenerative disease that's stealing her body one function at a time. But that's only the surface of this tragedy. The real story, the one that makes this scandal sadder with each revelation, is how we got here. Picture the trajectory. Award ceremonies where she once dazzled now feel like distant memories. Film sets that once echoed with her laughter now stand empty and silent, replaced by hospital rooms and physical therapy sessions that offer hope without promising healing. The visual metaphor is almost too perfect. A spotlight slowly dimming, a stage gradually emptying, a performer who gave everything discovering that everything wasn't enough. This isn't merely a story about illness, though multiple sclerosis plays a devastating role. It's not just about career decline, though watching a gifted actress lose her ability to perform breaks hearts across the industry. This is a story about a lifetime of pain that was always there, buried under professional smiles and punchlines, and how that pain is finally, brutally, forcing its way to the surface. It's about pressure applied to a child and compounded over decades until the foundation cracked. It's about secrets that Hollywood's machinery worked hard to keep hidden, and how one woman's deteriorating health has become the catalyst that's exposing them all. Imagine a slow cinematic zoom, starting with Christina as she is now, frail and honest and heartbreakingly vulnerable, then pulling back through time into the glittering, dangerous world that shaped her. The camera travels backward through the years, past the awards and accolades, past the comeback roles and the cancer survival, past the sitcom fame and the childhood stardom, all the way back to a baby being carried onto sound stages because her mother needed the money. The journey reveals a truth that Hollywood prefers to keep in shadow. Some careers begin not with opportunity, but with exploitation, and some performers never escape that original sin. Some secrets were never meant to stay buried. But when your body betrays you and you can no longer maintain the performance, when the carefully constructed public persona crumbles because you simply don't have the energy to sustain it anymore, that's when the truth comes out. And Christina Applegate's truth is sadder than anyone imagined. Hollywood in the 1970s was a strange, glittering beast, chaotic and dazzling in equal measure, full of creative possibility and predatory danger. It was an industry still operating under old studio system rules, even as those structures crumbled. A place where children were commodities and parents were stage managers, where the line between nurturing talent and exploiting it had always been blurry at best. This was the world into which Christina Applegate was born on November 25, 1971, and more importantly, this was the world that claimed her before she could even walk. Her mother, Nancy Pretty, had once dreamed of her own stardom, a singer and actress whose career never quite reached the heights she'd hoped for. By the time Christina arrived, Nancy was a single mother facing the brutal economics of Los Angeles, where rent doesn't care about your artistic dreams and groceries don't pay for themselves. So she did what desperate parents in Hollywood have always done. She put her child to work. Christina's earliest memories aren't of playgrounds or birthday parties. They're of lights, hot, bright, unforgiving, and the strange rhythm of a soundstage, where emotions are performed on command and authenticity is whatever the director says it is. At just 3 months old, Christina appeared in a Playtex commercial. 3 months. An infant who couldn't speak or walk or understand what was happening to her was already performing for cameras, already generating income, already learning the fundamental lesson that would define her life. Your value lies in what you can give others. By the time she was old enough to have memories, she was already a working actress, cycling through soap operas and bit parts, her childhood compressed into the gaps between auditions and filming schedules. There's a particularly eerie early credit in her filmography, a 1981 horror film called Jaws of Satan, where 9-year-old Christina appeared alongside demonic serpents and B-movie scares. The symbolism is almost too heavy-handed to mention, except that it's true. A child surrounded by predators, real and metaphorical, learning to perform fear and vulnerability on command. These weren't just acting exercises, they were conditioning. Teaching a young girl that her emotions were material to be mined, that her discomfort was less important than the shot, that the show must always go on. The psychological cost of this childhood is impossible to fully calculate. Normal developmental milestones, learning to trust, forming secure attachments, developing a sense of self separate from performance, were all compromised. Christina's identity became inextricably linked to the camera's gaze, to other people's approval, to the validation that comes from being watched and applauded. She didn't grow up learning who she was. She grew up learning who people wanted her to be. And Hollywood's culture in that era, though we pretend it's changed, normalized this exploitation. Nobody questioned whether it was appropriate for children to work adult hours or be subjected to adult pressures. Nobody worried about the psychological impact of teaching kids that love and approval were conditional on their performance. The entertainment industry blurred every boundary between professionalism and predation, and children like Christina were simply expected to navigate that confusion without guidance or protection. Years later, she would attempt to articulate this strange childhood, the sense of having been robbed of something essential she couldn't quite name. But by then, the damage was done, the patterns established. She'd learned too well how to perform happiness while feeling empty, how to deliver exactly what people wanted while losing touch with what she needed, how to be everyone's favorite while belonging to no one, not even herself. At 15 years old, Christina Applegate walked into an audition that would define her life and nearly destroy it. The show was Married, with Children, Fox's answer to the wholesome family sitcoms dominating television. The role was Kelly Bundy, the beautiful, promiscuous, magnificently stupid daughter of a dysfunctional Chicago family. Christina got the part. America fell in love. And the trap snapped shut. This wasn't a triumph, though it looked like one from the outside. This was a transaction. Fox needed a breakout hit to establish their fledgling network, and they found it by pushing boundaries that other networks wouldn't cross. The show was deliberately provocative, proudly lowbrow, and unapologetically sexual. And at its center was a teenage girl being asked, no, required, to play a hypersexualized character for adult audiences. Christina became the symbol of 1980s adolescent sexuality, blonde, busty, available, and just smart enough to deliver the punchlines while remaining the joke. Her Kellyisms became legendary, delightfully absurd malapropisms and dim-witted observations that made audiences roar with laughter. She was genuinely gifted at physical comedy, had impeccable timing, and brought surprising warmth to a character that could have been purely mean-spirited. But each laugh reinforced a cage. Each episode reminded viewers, and reminded Christina, that her value lay in being beautiful and dumb, in being the object of desire and derision simultaneously. Behind the scenes, something darker was happening. The show ran for 11 seasons, from 1987 to 1997, meaning Christina spent her entire adolescence and early adulthood trapped in this role. The formative years when most people figure out who they are, she spent being Kelly Bundy, and the pressure was relentless. Not just to be funny, but to maintain a specific physical appearance that the show's humor depended on. The eating disorder started subtly. 5 almonds for breakfast. Notes on the mirror reminding her she wasn't thin enough, wasn't disciplined enough, wasn't good enough. These weren't random acts of self-harm. They were ritualized attempts at control in a life that offered her very little. If she couldn't control what roles she was offered, or how people saw her, or what the show demanded from her week after week, she could at least control what went into her body. The obsession became all-consuming. Counting calories, weighing herself multiple times daily, exercising to exhaustion. The quiet voice in her head that said if she just tried harder, starved more effectively, she could finally be perfect enough to earn love that wasn't conditional. Her mother Nancy was there through all of it, sometimes helping with auditions, sometimes watching from the wings, but never quite recognizing the damage being done. This wasn't villainy. It was generational ignorance, the same blindness that affects so many stage parents. Nancy genuinely believed she was helping her daughter succeed, not understanding that success was costing Christina her sense of self. Love in Hollywood often looks like enabling harm, confusing support with sacrifice, believing that any price is worth paying for fame. The show made Christina wealthy and famous. It opened doors and created opportunities, but it also typecast her so thoroughly that escaping Kelly Bundy became her defining professional struggle. More painfully, it taught her that her worth was tied to her appearance and her ability to make others laugh while making herself small. The camera that celebrated her also consumed her, taking and taking until there was almost nothing left. Looking back, Christina sees those years with clear eyes. I was given a gift and a curse simultaneously. The gift was success and financial security. The curse was learning to hate myself at 16 and spending decades trying to unlearn it. The 1990s found Christina Applegate desperately trying to break free from the Kelly Bundy straitjacket. She was still young, in her early 20s, but already burdened with a reputation that threatened to define her entire career. Hollywood is cruel to actors who try to escape their successful personas, and it's especially cruel to women who dare to demand complexity after being celebrated for simplicity. Her first major attempt at reinvention came with Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead in 1991, where she played Sue Ellen Crandall, a teenager forced to pose as an adult to support her siblings. The film flopped at the box office, dismissed by critics as lightweight teen fare. But something unexpected happened in the years that followed. Late-night cable television picked it up, VHS rentals made it a sleepover staple, and slowly, quietly, it became a cult classic. The film's message, a young woman proving she's capable of more than anyone expects, resonated beyond its modest production, perhaps because audiences could sense Christina's own hunger to be taken seriously. Throughout the decade, she took risks. The big hit in 1998 paired her with Mark Wahlberg in a violent action comedy that showcased her willingness to subvert her wholesome image. Mafia. The same year let her display her gift for absurdist humor alongside Jay Moore and Lloyd Bridges. These weren't prestige projects, but they were choices, evidence of an actress actively working to expand her range and demolish the dumb blonde stereotype that threatened to follow her forever. She was growing too as a person. In interviews from this period, she displays a self-awareness that's both refreshing and painful. She called herself an asshat for her early arrogance, acknowledging that success at 15 had given her an inflated ego that reality had worked hard to deflate. This humility, this willingness to admit imperfection, would become one of her most endearing qualities. Unlike many actors who maintain carefully curated public personas, Christina was increasingly honest about her struggles, her mistakes, her journey from insecure teenager to thoughtful adult. The early 2000s brought new opportunities. The Sweetest Thing in 2002 paired her with Cameron Diaz and Selma Blair in an R-rated comedy that let women be raunchy, sexual, and funny on their own terms. The film's bathroom scene, notorious for its frank discussion of male anatomy, was exactly the kind of fearless comedy Christina excelled at. Her chemistry with Cameron was electric, two talented women refusing to be boxed into romantic comedy conventions, using humor as a form of defiance and power. Then came Anchorman in 2004, where she held her own against Will Ferrell and the entire Apatow comedy machine as Veronica Corningstone, the ambitious newswoman fighting for respect in a chauvinist newsroom. The role wasn't large, but Christina made it memorable, funny and fierce, refusing to be anyone's love interest or punchline. She was reclaiming comedy on her terms, using her gifts not to make herself small, but to take up space and demand attention. Watching this period of her career, you can see an actress rediscovering confidence and artistic identity. Each role was a declaration. I am more than you thought. I contain multitudes. I will not be reduced to a single note. The entertainment industry was slowly, grudgingly beginning to agree. Christina Applegate had dreamed of Broadway since childhood. The live audience, the physical challenge of dance, the immediacy of theater where every performance is unique and unrepeatable. In 2005, that dream materialized when she was cast as Charity Hope Valentine in the revival of Sweet Charity, the classic musical about a dancer hoping for love while working in a seedy dance hall. It should have been her triumph, the moment when Hollywood's former sitcom star proved she could command a Broadway stage. Instead, it became a preview of the physical betrayal that would eventually define her life. The show was grueling. 8 performances a week of intense choreography, demanding vocals, emotional vulnerability exposed to live audiences who could see every imperfection. Christina threw herself into it with characteristic intensity, rehearsing until her body screamed. Pushing through pain because pushing through pain was what she'd been taught to do since she was 3 months old. The show must go on. Your discomfort doesn't matter. The audience paid for perfection. Then her foot broke, not during rehearsal, where an injury might be managed and healed. During an actual performance, the snap of bone, the immediate bloom of agony, the horrifying realization that something was seriously wrong. Most performers would have stopped. Most people would have left the stage. Christina kept dancing. For weeks afterward, she continued performing in tan medical boots designed to stabilize her injured foot. The visual was striking and deeply sad, an actress literally dancing through physical trauma because stopping felt impossible. It was courageous and tragic in equal measure, the hallmark of a woman who'd been conditioned since infancy to believe her value depended on her ability to perform regardless of cost. The critics noticed. The Tony nominators noticed. When the nominations were announced, Christina Applegate's name was there. recognition from theater's highest authority that she wasn't just a television actress dabbling in Broadway, but a legitimate musical theater talent deserving of respect. The nomination represented her highest artistic peak, validation that she'd successfully reinvented herself yet again. But the cost was permanent. The injury never fully healed. Her dancing days were effectively over. The physical joy of movement that had been one of her greatest pleasures became a source of pain and limitation. Her body, which she'd already learned to distrust through years of eating disorders and body dysmorphia, had now betrayed her in a new and fundamental way. Looking back, this Broadway run becomes tragically symbolic. Christina achieving her dream while simultaneously losing the physical capacity to continue pursuing it. The applause masked irreversible loss. The Tony nomination marked both arrival and ending. She'd proven she could dance at the highest level, and in doing so, destroyed her ability to keep dancing. "My body has always been both my instrument and my enemy," she would later reflect. "Broadway was when I started understanding I couldn't win that war." Christina's personal life during these years was as turbulent as her professional journey. In 2001, she married actor Jonathan Scheck, a relationship that looked like stability from the outside but masked the emotional emptiness that fame had never managed to fill. The marriage lasted less than 4 years, dissolving in 2005. The same year she was breaking her foot on Broadway, as if her life had decided to collapse on all fronts simultaneously. Divorce, even amicable divorce, leaves scars. For Christina, it reinforced a painful lesson she'd been learning since childhood. Nothing lasts, nothing's secure, and the love you're given is always conditional and temporary. The end of her marriage coincided with increasing anxiety about her health, her career, her purpose. She was in her mid-30s, successful by any objective measure, and profoundly lost. Then came a tragedy that would haunt her for years. Lee Grievous, a fellow actor and close friend, died of a drug overdose. The news devastated Christina in ways she struggled to articulate publicly. Lee's death represented the human cost of Hollywood's unspoken mental health crisis, the way the industry chews through people, celebrates them when they're useful, and discards them when they're struggling. It also triggered intense guilt. Why couldn't she save him? What could she have done differently? How many people in her orbit were suffering silently while maintaining public personas of success? These weren't questions with answers, but they haunted her nonetheless. She began speaking more openly about mental health, about the danger of pretending everything is fine when it's not, about the ways Hollywood's culture of toxic positivity actively prevents people from getting help. Her grief became advocacy, though the advocacy couldn't erase the loss. Then, in 2008, came the diagnosis that should have destroyed her, but somehow didn't: breast cancer. Christina was only 36 years old when doctors found the tumor. Her mother had survived breast cancer years earlier, so Christina was vigilant about screening, which likely saved her life. But vigilance couldn't prevent the terrifying reality of facing mortality, while Hollywood still expected her to perform, to smile, to be grateful for opportunities while privately battling a disease that kills. She chose a double mastectomy, not just removing the cancerous tissue, but both breasts entirely, a radical decision that reflected her determination to survive at any cost. The surgery was physically devastating. The recovery was long and painful. The psychological impact of losing body parts so tied to feminine identity and sexual appeal was something she struggled to process. But for the first time in her life, Christina had taken control of her body for herself. Not for Hollywood, not for audiences, not to meet someone else's standards. The decision was hers. The scars were hers. The survival was hers. "Cancer taught me that my body wasn't decoration or commodity," she said years later. "It was me, and I had the right to do whatever necessary to keep living." The late 2000s found Christina Applegate rebuilding her life and career from the ground up. She'd survived cancer. She'd ended a marriage that wasn't working. She'd begun the long process of healing both physically and emotionally, and somehow, she still wanted to act. Not because she needed the money or fame, but because performing was the only language she'd ever fully mastered, the only way she knew to communicate the complexity of being human. Her return to television was strategic and smart. Guest roles on Friends and Jesse kept her visible while she regained her strength. But the real comeback was Samantha Who, a comedy where she played a woman with amnesia trying to figure out who she was before an accident erased her memory. The metaphor was almost too perfect. Christina herself was essentially rebuilding her identity, trying to figure out who she was beyond the roles and expectations and traumas that had defined her. The show was charming and well-received. Christina's performance earned her an Emmy nomination and reminded Hollywood that she remained a gifted comic actress with dramatic range. More importantly, she'd leveraged her comeback into creative control. She was now an executive producer, shaping the stories being told rather than just performing them. The shift represented a fundamental change in her relationship to her work. She was no longer just the product being sold, but one of the people making decisions about what stories mattered and how they should be told. Then came Up All Night with Will Arnett, a comedy about new parents navigating the chaos of raising a baby while maintaining careers. Christina played Reagan Brinkley, a television producer returning to work after maternity leave, and the role reflected her own evolving life. She'd married musician Martin Lenoble in 2013 and welcomed daughter Sadie in 2011. Motherhood had given her a new lens through which to understand her own childhood, the choices her mother made, the ways trauma gets transmitted across generations when it's not acknowledged and healed. But success brought new anxieties. Christina dealt with stalkers, threats, and the particular terror of being a public figure with a child. She worried constantly about Sadie's safety, about whether her fame would damage her daughter the way Nancy's ambitions had damaged her. She was determined to give Sadie a different childhood, a normal one, even though she barely remembered what normal felt like. The television work continued with Dead to Me, Netflix's dark comedy about grief, friendship, and secrets. Christina played Jen Harding, a widow processing rage and loss while befriending the woman involved in her husband's death. The role was complex and challenging, allowing Christina to showcase dramatic skills that sitcoms rarely demanded. Her chemistry with co-star Linda Cardellini was extraordinary. Two middle-aged women carrying trauma and finding connection, telling stories Hollywood usually reserves for men. Dead to Me should have been a triumph, evidence that Christina Applegate had finally achieved the career respect and creative control she'd fought for decades to earn. And it was a triumph. But it was also the show where everything fell apart. Because while Christina was rebuilding her career and fighting for meaningful roles and trying to be a good mother and processing a lifetime of trauma, her body was preparing to betray her one final, devastating time. It started small, a stumble during filming that she blamed on exhaustion, numbness in her feet that she attributed to poor circulation, balance problems that seemed like normal signs of aging. She was in her late 40s after all, and bodies break down. But the symptoms persisted, worsened, and eventually demanded attention she could no longer avoid. The diagnosis came in 2021, multiple sclerosis, a chronic progressive disease of the central nervous system where the immune system attacks the protective covering of nerve fibers, disrupting communication between the brain and the body. There's no cure. Treatment can slow progression, but not stop it. Over time, people with MS lose their ability to walk, to control their bodies, to live independently. The same disease that had taken Christina's physical autonomy through eating disorders and cancer was now attacking her nervous system, stripping away function after function with cruel efficiency. The moment she heard those words, multiple sclerosis, Christina's entire world restructured itself. Everything she'd survived suddenly felt like prologue to this, the real challenge, the unwinnable fight. Her body, which had already been such a complicated source of pain and pleasure, triumph and trauma, was now definitively her enemy. The instrument she'd relied on for 50 years of performance was systematically shutting down, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Filming the final season of Dead to Me became an exercise in collective denial and extraordinary courage. The crew knew Christina was sick, but they didn't know how sick until they saw her arrive in a wheelchair, watched her struggle through takes, witnessed her forgetting lines as brain fog rolled in. Some days, she couldn't stand without assistance. Other days, the pain was so intense that filming had to stop. But she kept going, kept pushing, kept trying to deliver the performance her character and her audience deserved. Behind the scenes, crew members cried. Linda Cardellini held Christina between takes, offering physical and emotional support. The producers restructured schedules and rewrote scenes to accommodate her limitations. And Christina herself oscillated between determination and despair. Some days believing she could power through this the way she'd powered through everything else. Other days recognizing that this was different. This was permanent. This was the beginning of an end she couldn't delay through willpower alone. When the show wrapped, Christina was brutally honest in ways that shocked Hollywood. "I don't enjoy living." Not a cry for help or a suicidal statement, but simple truth-telling in a culture obsessed with positivity and inspiration. She was tired. She was in pain. Her body had become a prison, and she saw no reason to pretend otherwise just to make healthy people comfortable. But honesty became advocacy. Christina started speaking publicly about disability representation, demanding that studios provide proper accommodations for actors with chronic illnesses and mobility issues. She called out the industry's ableism, the way it discards performers whose bodies don't conform to narrow standards of ability. She used her platform and her pain to try to make things easier for the people who would come after her. the actors who would face similar struggles without her fame or resources to protect them. "If my disease means anything," she said, "it's this: disabled people exist. We have stories. We deserve to tell them, and you don't get to erase us anymore." Christina Applegate's increasing vulnerability and honesty collided with social media culture in predictable and devastating ways. Every raw confession was transformed into a headline designed for clicks rather than context. Every emotional moment was dissected by strangers who felt entitled to judge her pain, her choices, her right to express feelings that made them uncomfortable. The 2024 election night became a flashpoint. Christina, watching the results with growing horror, posted a series of emotional messages about feeling unsafe, about fearing for her daughter's future, about the despair of watching democracy crumble while her body did the same. The posts were deeply human, grief-filled, frightened, angry, exactly the kind of response millions of people were feeling privately. But social media doesn't reward humanity, it punishes vulnerability. Within hours, Christina was trending for the wrong reasons. Conservative commentators mocked her meltdown. Progressive critics accused her of privileged white feminism. Entertainment media turned her pain into content, publishing article after article analyzing her mental state based on tweets written in the midst of emotional crisis. Nobody asked if maybe, just maybe, a chronically ill woman watching her country implode had earned the right to publicly grieve without being turned into a spectacle. The backlash illustrated a cruel dynamic. Society demands that women, especially famous women, be authentic and vulnerable, but then punishes them viciously when that authenticity looks messy or uncomfortable. Christina was supposed to be inspiring. She was supposed to suffer gracefully, to turn her tragedy into motivation for others, to smile through the pain and reassure healthy people that disability doesn't have to be that bad. When she refused to perform that role, when she admitted that sometimes life with MS is unbearable and she resents it deeply, people turned on her. Then came the Wildfire podcast rant. Los Angeles was burning. Neighborhoods Christina had lived in were destroyed, and misinformation was spreading about the causes and responses. She went on her podcast exhausted, angry, and done with being diplomatic. She called out the lies, defended her city, and expressed the rage of someone who'd spent decades being polite while people consumed her like entertainment. The response was predictably divided. Some people celebrated her honesty, others accused her of being unhinged, and the media once again reduced her complexity to clickable controversy. Through it all, Christina kept working on her memoir, You with the Sad Eyes, a title taken from something someone once said to her, recognizing the sorrow she carried behind professional smiles. The book promises to be her final act of defiance, an unflinching examination of what Hollywood takes from people, especially women, especially those who start young and never escape the machinery's grip. She's promised to expose what silence once protected, the exploitation, the abuse, the systemic failures that turn children into products and adults into cautionary tales. "I'm done protecting people who never protected me," she said. "If my honesty makes the industry uncomfortable, good. It should be uncomfortable. What happened to me happens to thousands of people, and we all stay quiet because we're taught that speaking up means we're difficult, ungrateful, bitter. I'm all of those things now, and I earned the right to be." Christina Applegate's final red carpet appearance was both heartbreaking and defiant. She walked slowly, carefully, leaning on a cane, wearing an elegant gown and an expression of absolute determination. Cameras captured every difficult step, the visible effort, the way her body refused to cooperate with her intentions. But they also captured something else: dignity, refusal to hide. The revolutionary act of existing publicly in a body that society wants to erase. This is what Christina's legacy has become. Not Kelly Bundy, though that character will live forever in syndication. Not even her later acclaimed performances, though they deserve recognition. Her legacy is transformation. From a symbol of conventional beauty to a symbol of unconventional strength. From Hollywood's perfect blonde to disability's imperfect advocate. From someone who performed for others' comfort to someone who exists on her own terms, regardless of who that makes uncomfortable. She has become a fierce advocate for cancer screening, speaking openly about how early detection saved her life and encouraging women to be vigilant about their health. She's pushed for disability rights in Hollywood, demanding accommodations that will help actors who come after her, using her platform to make visible what the industry prefers to ignore. She's talked honestly about mental health, about the danger of toxic positivity, about the right to feel despair without being pathologized or fixed. Most importantly, she's tried to give her daughter Sadie what Nancy couldn't give her: permission to be imperfect, to fail, to exist without performing. You are so much more. Those words weren't just about Sadie's potential. They were about Christina's regret, her recognition of how much of herself was sacrificed to other people's expectations, her determination that her daughter would know a different way of being in the world. The circle closes where it began, with a mother and daughter, with Hollywood's machinery churning in the background, with the question of what we owe to the industry that creates stars and what the industry owes to the people it consumes. Christina spent 50 years giving Hollywood everything: her childhood, her body, her mental health, her privacy, her pain. Now, as her career ends not by choice but by physical necessity, she's taking something back: her story. The lights that illuminated her since she was 3 months old are finally fading. The crowd that applauded her performances is falling silent. The roles that defined her are being inherited by younger actresses who hopefully won't pay the same price. But Christina Applegate's voice, raw, imperfect, brutally honest, lingers as both warning and inspiration. She survived Hollywood, and in surviving it, she's trying to ensure that the children who come after her have a different experience, a safer path, a culture that values their humanity more than their marketability. "I don't know if I made a difference," she said recently, her voice tired but steady. "But I told the truth, and maybe that's enough. Maybe the next girl who gets dragged to an audition at 3 months old will have parents who think twice. Maybe the next actress who gets sick won't face the same ableism I did. Maybe honesty matters more than I think it does." The camera holds on her face one last time, the sad eyes that someone noticed years ago, the smile that's learned to coexist with sorrow, the beauty that's been redefined by survival. This is Christina Applegate at 53, not Hollywood's golden girl anymore, but something more valuable, a woman who refused to disappear when her body and her industry both told her to, a mother trying to break generational trauma, a survivor telling the truth, even when the truth isn't inspiring or neat or comfortable. The scandal isn't that she got sick. The scandal is what we did to her long before the disease arrived, how we took a baby and turned her into a commodity, how we applauded her pain as long as she made it entertaining, how we demanded her honesty and then punished her for providing it. Christina Applegate's story just gets sadder and sadder, but in that sadness lies something else too: resistance, dignity, and the radical act of refusing to let Hollywood write her ending. She's writing it herself, one honest word at a time, and she doesn't care anymore if it makes anyone uncomfortable. That, finally, is freedom.